Hi there. I have to stop and think well, I know this is 2021 and it's our January live event for Essential Vegan Desserts. I would like to welcome everyone who's here, the newest group that started very recently, people who are continuing their studies, and some of our graduates. I have been having the time of my life grading these phenomenal final dessert parties that are our capstone event. And I'll tell you, everyone's doing a really brilliant job. So before I jump into today's topic, which is liquid desserts or liquid desserts. Can desserts be healthy? Can desserts that are liquid are still desserts? I'm really excited about the topic, and I'm going to have some really yummy things to enjoy later. But I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. On the right side of your screen, you're going to see a place to ask questions. I'm going to get to as many questions as I can. You can always ask me a follow-up question, or if I don't get to your question, write to me at fran@rouxbe.com, and I'll be happy to talk with you. People who are in Essential Vegan Desserts, the place to ask questions about any of the assignments would be in the Q&A on your dashboard. That's because if you have a question, it's likely that other people in the course have a question as well. So when I answer it, everyone gets to see it. And take a look at your assignment before you do it. Make sure that you read the criteria and follow them. It's not one size fits all. There are different criteria for different assignments. And there are photos posted, people's work. That doesn't mean the work was correct. So you use that as inspiration, but follow the criteria. If you have a question, if you're in Essential Vegan Desserts, please join the Facebook group, the private Facebook group, if you haven't already. Our wonderful producer, Patrick, has put the link up. This is just for people who are registered for Essential Vegan Desserts. You get to stay in the Facebook group, I hope, forever. In fact, I never like to see people go because we get to know each other. But if you want an opinion about a hand mixer or a blender or has a particular ingredient, that's a great place to ask that question. So I hope everyone is doing well and is healthy and taking care of themselves during this really difficult time. I know that there are some ingredients that are a little harder to get, but you can always talk to me about that. Just have a good time and eat well, take care of yourself. And now let's talk about desserts. I made a couple of beverages ahead of time to show you, all based on the recipe that's in the event document. There is an event document that you can download. I have put some information about making liquid desserts in general, and then there's a recipe from the course for a vanilla milkshake. The recipe was done by Chad Sarno. Many of you probably know Chad from, well, now he's wicked healthy, Chad, but we've been pals for a really long time. So I took his basic vanilla shake and I made it. Now, I used oat milk and I followed the recipe exactly. So I don't actually have it in front of me. It's in my kitchen, but it was oat milk. I used soaked cashews, raw, unsalted, unroasted. Obviously, if they're raw, they're unsalted cashews as the base. He gives you a choice of using young coconut meat. And I used maple syrup as the sweetener. I added a pinch of salt. I used vanilla extract, and then I did add some vanilla bean caviar, the seeds inside the vanilla bean, because I got a few recently. I'm feeling very excited about that. This is not all it made. I divided it up. I divided the vanilla milkshake up. And then what I did was I added some frozen raspberries to a portion. How much? I did it by eye. I did it by taste. I have some, I really believe in seasonal eating, but I had some frozen raspberries in the freezer to use. So I added that, and I also added some dried strawberry powder that I had left over from grinding the strawberry powder. So that's this one. And to this bit, I added some cocoa powder, again, a pinch of salt, and a little, here I used organic cane sugar, vegan cane sugar, because of the cocoa powder. There's tons of things you can do with this basic shake. You can add turmeric and make it like a golden milk, and I would sweeten that with date syrup or coconut nectar or maple syrup. I also, let me bend down and get this because I just got these glasses. So liquid desserts don't have to be in a glass. They can be in a bowl. And I poured some of the strawberry into this bowl. I'm going to add some of the raspberries, that's raspberry, not strawberry, that are defrosting, and I'm going to put them on top of that. For a dessert party, I would grate some chocolate over here, or maybe later I'll put a shard of transfer chocolate that I made at the last live event. Same thing here, some strawberry powder. Now, let's say you want to make this into an alcoholic beverage. You can do that. I think this would be a delicious strawberry daiquiri with the right kind of liqueur. And believe it or not, I don't remember what's in a daiquiri. So if anybody knows, put it in the Q&A or tell me. You can do that. There's, it's up to you in terms of what you think as a liquid dessert. You can drink them, you can spoon them, or you can make a lightly gelled fruit soup, which is one of the assignments in this course. You take fresh juice, you either squeeze the juice yourself, or use a juicer, or buy some bottled or frozen unsweetened juice. Infuse it with any kind of spices or herbs that you like. Some people add vegetables actually to theirs as well. And add a little bit of agar powder. Agar, for anyone who doesn't know, is vegetable gelatin. It's been used for millennia. It's a really clean gelling agent. You use just a little bit so that your fruit soup has some body, and then you can fill it out. We have a photo of it. In fact, I gave Patrick a photo to show you. You can fill your bowl, so it can be little like this one, or a larger bowl with lots of fruit. So there are ways to get some healthy ingredients, some healthy food into your desserts. But I want to tell you again a story. Some of you have probably heard this story about desserts. My very first job after changing my diet to what was really a macrobiotic diet, when I gave up all animal foods, this was over 25 years ago, I got a job as a pastry chef in a vegan restaurant or a macrobiotic restaurant in New York City. And I wanted to take all the sugar out, or most of the sugar out of the desserts. These were not desserts that I was developing. They were the restaurant's recipes that I had to follow. But I guess that I was kind of, sometimes when you start something new, it was a little bit the food police. And my boss came to me. I thought he was going to fire me. He looked really angry. And he said, "Costigan, you're making brownies, not brown bread." And I understood what he meant. When a dessert, you're serving a dessert, you're eating a dessert, there's a certain expectation. Now, I don't like things super sweet. My taste buds have changed. What I think of as sweet, a lot of people don't think of as so sweet, but it is dessert. It's not a vegetable plate. So you want to use just enough sweetness to bring up the flavor. And I want to show you what's on. Oh, thank you, Patrick. So daiquiri is ice, sugar, strawberries, lime juice, lemon juice, and there's carbonated beverage in a daiquiri. Well, I think that I would use some of that. I think adding some lime juice to this and some rum, watch out for me tonight, would be amazing. What I have on the back burner here, sitting over, not in water, is some very light ganache that I made earlier. Actually, I added some chocolate to it. I was making a chocolate syrup simply by making a ganache with more milk, less chocolate. My favorite thing to do, though, or what makes the most sense to me, is to make something thick. You can always thin it. And if there's anyone here from New York City or Brooklyn, I'm going to make an egg cream with this. And I know if Char Nolan's here, she knows what I'm talking about. So it's chocolate syrup. If you are from Brooklyn, it had to be, I think you bet, chocolate syrup. This is oat milk and a high percentage of chocolate, a pinch of salt, and that's it. I didn't use any sugar in this. And then some fizzy water. Here in this pot, which needs a stir, can never have too many whisks. Whoa, 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 that's not good. I took some of the chocolate that I showed you in the shot glass and I heated it because I think it would make a really nice hot chocolate, hot cocoa. Not hot chocolate, hot cocoa. That was made with cocoa. There is a difference, and I'm going to show you. Now, if you don't want to use nuts, if there's a nut allergy or you want something leaner, what you can do is, this is cocoa that was made with oat milk, Dutch processed cocoa powder, pinch of salt, a little sweetener. It's good. It tastes good, but it doesn't have a lot of body because I used a pretty low-fat, non-dairy milk. I could have used a richer one, but I didn't. But here's the trick. You make a starch slurry. I'm actually using tapioca here. And this recipe is in my cookbook, but I would be happy to send it to people. Bring this up to a simmer. And then I'm just going to stir it in. So you get this perception of thickness, and it's a really nice thing to do. I'm going to keep my eye in two places because even chocolate can burn, and that even cocoa powder can burn. So you want to pay attention to that. I'm going to start taking some questions here because I think there are a lot, and then I'm going to jump back to talking about different ingredients that you can use, different kinds of sweeteners. Don't forget about dates. Dates are really great. But before I go to the first question, I know I said I would. Going back to this idea of desserts, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Rip Esselstyn, the Engine 2 diet, and his father is Dr. Esselstyn, Essie, we call him, Caldwell Esselstyn. And I've been a friend of the family for a while. I admire them tremendously. I have all the books, and I pretty much follow a whole food plant-based diet. I eat some dessert almost every day, but a very small piece. Well, that family is very strict about desserts and no oil, as you know, and very limited or no granulated sweeteners at all. But when Rip was getting married, he needed wedding cakes, and he asked me to make them. So I think that's really an overarching idea that desserts can be part of a healthful diet. Let me answer the first question. Veronique wants to know, do you have a recipe for an old-fashioned pound cake minus the pound of butter? Well, no, actually, I don't. Something that takes a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, is not really going to be adaptable. Now, I can use a pound of vegan butter. There are some really nice vegan butters in the marketplace now. But instead of that, there are some wonderful vegan cakes that will taste kind of like a pound cake or a genoise. You know, you don't have to invent the wheel anymore. You don't go and grab a recipe off the internet from someone that you don't know. You're really asking for trouble. Our time is valuable and ingredients cost money, but you can find some nice cake. So I would say you want to use a pound of butter, Veronique. You're going to need a lot of eggs too. Deborah is still having a problem finding whole wheat pastry flour. I know. I'm lucky. I really got a bunch. I still have quite a lot of whole wheat pastry flour from King Arthur. They do not have it anymore. And from Bob's Red Mill. And then I found a local mill and bought some more. I also bought a small refrigerator for the back of my house to put this in. What you can do as a sub, and I've been telling my students, and I'm actually going to be putting this in as a PDF. Oh, actually, the answer, Deborah, is in the Q&A. What you do is you can use more AP flour, use some whole wheat flour, take some percentage of the whole wheat flour out. Let's say you're using a recipe calls for a cup of whole wheat pastry flour. Use 2/3 of a cup of whole wheat flour and 1/3 of a cup of a starch, and you will have a facsimile to whole wheat pastry flour. It's really curious to me why there's so much trouble finding that particular flour. But you know, there may be some of you who can't find yeast. It's really an interesting phenomenon. I think everybody is baking. I understand there are no jars available either now. Evelina, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, wants to know how to make a fluffy gluten and fat-free cake. Don't be mad at me. I'm telling you the truth. You can't really make a fluffy gluten and fat-free cake. You can make a very decent gluten-free and vegan cake. We have a really nice vegan vanilla cupcake in the course, for example. People who make that recipe side by side with the wheat version notice a difference, but it can be very nice. Fat-free cakes can be okay, but I don't think of them ever as fluffy. They're usually denser. I have an oil-free version of my chocolate cake to live for. That was, in fact, Rip's layer cake. It's very good, but it's denser. Fat goes to creating a nice crumb, and you can't get away from that. So we have a whole unit in Essential Vegan Desserts that talks about substitutions for fat for people who don't want to use fat in their baked goods. There are some baked goods where you really do need fat. You need fat to make a rolled out pastry dough, for example. Some people like to use applesauce, for example, instead of fat. But it's very hard. I want you all to understand that it's hard to get something that is super tender and super fluffy without any fat at all. My recipes use just enough. I look at some recipes for making icings or making a carob candy, for example, or a whipped topping, and there is so much coconut oil in those recipes. I would really rather make something else. So I hope that answers your question. Annie wants to know, do you use aquafaba, and is there another non-gassy alternative for vegan whipped topping? Well, Annie, I do use aquafaba. I love using aquafaba. For anyone who doesn't know, aquafaba is typically the juice, the liquid that's left after cooking chickpeas. Other beans can be used, but chickpeas are the most common. I do not find it to be gassy. If you do, then you're not going to use it. It makes the most gorgeous meringue. You can torch it. We have baked Alaska in the course, and people really like that. There are lots of other vegan whipped toppings. I mean, people make coconut milk topping, the fat part of the coconut milk that should separate out. It does not always. And in the course, I have a really low fat, maybe no fat version, no fat added version of a whipped topping where the milk is set with agar and a starch. Agar and starch are really foundational ingredients in vegan desserts. So you can find lots of other vegan whipped toppings. I have a commercial vegan cream that I tried the other day. It was sent to me by the manufacturer. It's really difficult to find now. It's made with a whole bunch of things that I would never use. In other words, the ingredient list is like this, but I whipped it and it made what to me tasted like the whipped cream from the old days. I mean, I haven't really tasted dairy desserts in a long time, but it reminded me of whipped cream. Ken wants to know, are these desserts compliant with a whole food plant-based lifestyle? Ken, I'm not sure what you mean by these desserts. If you mean the desserts, that I'm making today, it depends on where you are. To me, they are, if you're completely no fat, well then this cocoa would be a good thing to do because it's made with a very lean milk. But people who don't want to use any sweetener at all, for example, or any added fat at all, I always invite those people to make fruit desserts. There are so many desserts that are made with fruit that are absolutely sensational. Poach a pear, bake an apple, make that fruit soup, the gel that I told you about. It's gorgeous. It's just lovely. Make one of these. This would certainly be compliant if you didn't use a granulated sweetener. So I just want to take a minute here. And that's it. It's done. It's done. Tapioca starch is not the same as tapioca, instant tapioca granules. Tapioca is a starch. I tend to use arrowroot first when I can. There are some recipes where arrowroot doesn't work. Arrowroot thickens just under the boil. So as soon as it comes to a boil, you take it off the heat. If you keep cooking it, it will thin out again. Cornstarch, I use organic, non-GMO cornstarch, and that works fine. They're 1-to-1 in terms of measure, but you cook cornstarch a little bit longer. And for people who cannot use cornstarch, then I suggest tapioca, which also is 1-to-1 and bakes a little bit longer. I see I missed a question from Lynn. Any tips for making vegan creme brulee? I have a beautiful creme brulee in my cookbook, Vegan Chocolate. You just want to get, whatever you want your base to be. It can be a cashew cream base. It can be a coconut cream base. Just you're going to have to learn to use some agar and starch. So you want it set, but not terribly set. I've done it also with tofu. In terms of these liquid desserts, I said earlier, and I stand behind it, desserts are meant to be treats. They're treats. You have a little bit of something that tastes like a dessert. It tastes special. It's a little bit sweet, but you can sneak in some extra benefit. Like you could really use tofu. Now, I differentiate between silken tofu, which really blends into making it would make a beautiful creme brulee, for example, not all by itself, but with some agar and a starch slurry and spices and so on. I've been experimenting with using firm tofu instead of silken because it has more protein. I have to play with it. I have to add more liquid, for example, and maybe flavor it more, but it's been working really well. Monica likes boozing up her desserts with wine and liqueurs. Well, then you would like you would like these with some liqueur, and I also have a white Russian made with chocolate vodka and the chocolate vodka gels, which are really nice. So you are looking for tips on using wine, Kahlua, and other alcohols. How much would you add to a cake, a ganache, or frosting without it losing its structure? Well, that's a good question. It's a liquid, right? So if you're going to be adding liquid to a ganache, for example, you're going to have to take out some of the milk. I always start small and taste. I don't know how strong you like the flavor of the liqueur to be, and they're not all the same. I learned this recently. Last month, I made eggnog. It was December, and I think the live event, we were doing eggnog. And it was very surprising to me. The rum eggnog knocked my head off. It was really boozy. And when I did it with Kahlua, it wasn't as much. So I don't use a whole lot of alcohol in my desserts, simply because when I was seeing people and serving people, there were a lot of people who didn't want alcohol in their desserts. But you just can use it as an accent, and it should be fine. So Evelina wants to know, what's the exact rule of fats in desserts and baked goods? So that would be, that's a class, that's a whole unit. Fats add a tenderness. They add, depending on what the fat is, there will be some flavor component, perhaps. If you're using olive oil, I like to use olive oil as my oil. My recipes were developed before this plethora of vegan butters were available. There was only really stinky, awful, smelly, bad for us hydrogenated margarine at the time. But so I used neutral flavored oil. If I'm making a cake, like my orange almond olive oil cake, an Italian cake, I want to taste the oil. One of the things to note is that oil is 100% fat, whereas butter and margarine are not. In butter, there's not cocoa, I've got chocolate on the brain. There's butter fat, there's solids. So when you're making a conversion, you use 7/8 of the amount or 3/4 of the amount of oil that you would use for the butter. So that seems pretty good. Let's see. But, without using oils, nuts, seeds, or avocado, how to make creamy cake fillings and puddings, I would look at tofu for you, and I would get to know Agar. Make Agar your friend and starch slurry your friend. We do a lot of this in Essential Vegan Desserts. We really do. This is not a forks over knives course. This is not a fat-free course or a gluten-free course, but we touch on all of it. And I've had students go through the course who have all these particular dietary considerations. I ask them to make a particular recipe, maybe a half of it, the way that it's written, so that there is a baseline, so you know what it's supposed to be before you go ahead and change it up. So that's what I would say. Rebecca says, whole food plant-based baked goods seem always to be gooey, not fluffy. And of the non, well, it's a challenge. Again, you have to really work with it. They're going to be different. They shouldn't be gooey. When I first encountered vegan desserts, and there were no books, they were ridiculous. The recipes said use 1 cup of barley malt or 1 cup of maple sugar. I mean, there wasn't or all whole wheat flour. Having been trained traditionally, I knew that was impossible. But I noticed that the cakes that I was tasting, again, way back in the day, were both dry and gooey at the same time. So I thought that was very interesting. It's about balance, and it's about using a good recipe, and it's about having a baseline, learning the techniques, and that's what we teach in this course, and then going on to dividing a recipe in half or by a quarter, and you just keep going until you figure it out. And it can be done. Regina says, I noticed store-bought vegan powdered sugar contains tapioca starch. That's a really, I'm glad you brought that up. Vegan powdered sugar, most of them use tapioca starch, not cornstarch. The starch in, we're talking about confectioner's sugar, not granulated sugar that you powder in your Vitamix. There's a difference. So there's starch to keep it from clumping. And the tapioca starch is used, I use Wholesome Sweeteners probably the most. And they do use tapioca, and so many of the other brands do as well. Florida Crystals still uses cornstarch. They use a non-GMO cornstarch. That's probably the reason that the organic brands are using tapioca instead of cornstarch, is because a lot of cornstarch is GMO. It has to be sifted many times, not just once. I'm going back to the question, but it works really nicely. Now, when I'm sifting, when I do a mise en place, I do what you do, or those of you who know about mise en place, which Ruby really stresses, and it can change your life. But I will powder a whole bunch of sugar at one time, for example. I'll soak a lot of nuts. For example, to make this cream, I didn't actually use my Vitamix. Char Nolan, who's a longtime friend of mine here and an instructor at Rouxbe, had said to me this summer that these, what is it called? Oh, a NutriBullet would be good for quickie things. I thought I was going away. That didn't happen, and I didn't want to bring my Vitamix. So I soak cashews overnight or for 2 days, and I don't just soak 5 ounces, which is generally what I use for one recipe. I drain them very, very well, and I know by now that 5 ounces of soaked cashews becomes 7 ounces. So I can soak lots and just divide it up, and then I have it, and it really works well. So that's what I used, and it worked really, really, really well. My favorite vegan margarine or butter, well, I like the taste of Miyoko's the best. So Miyoko's is a cultured butter. She has lightly salted butter. She has now an unsalted butter, which works very well for desserts. And she has an oat butter, but that's really a spread, and you don't want to use that for desserts. There are higher fat butters that you would need to do some other things. For example, if you're making a buttercream and you're using Miyoko's, which is a high hydration and lowish fat, it's about 71% fat in her butter, your buttercream isn't going to hold up. But my students have been able to find ways to do it. You can use some vegan shortening as well. If you use a higher fat butter, I received a sample of a butter called Flora, which is a very high fat butter. And even one of my neighbors, who's a very famous traditional pastry chef, used it to make puff pastry, and she fell in love with it. The brand, the Flora, is the same as Country Crock. So if you see Country Crock and you need a high-fat butter, that's the one to use. But flavor-wise, I like Miyoko's the best. I know there are a lot of people who like Earth Balance. If it works for you, it works for you. I don't happen to like the taste very well, very much. But, we all have different ideas about what works. And I also am not a big, buttercream sort of a person. So I don't use a lot of butter to this day because it's not the way I develop my recipes. Although that said, I have started noticing that just a little bit of butter here and there really makes things taste good. So Carrie says every vegan whipped cream recipe you've tried is just meh. What do I suggest? I can't really suggest anything because I don't know what whipped cream recipes you use. So if you give me a little more information, I might be able to help you. Anne is struggling with creating desserts that don't require any food starches because her husband's extremely allergic to cornstarch. So I'm unable to use powdered sugar. Well, you don't really, I don't use powdered sugar very much. If you're making a buttercream, American style buttercream calls for using powdered sugar. If he can have one with with the tapioca starch, that's an option. Or just try using very finely powdered sugar. So when in my recipes say, for example, a half a cup of organic sugar lightly ground. And I do that in a food processor just to break it up. And that's because vegan cane sugar, depending on the brand, the crystal is more fine than others, but they're all bigger than a white sugar crystal. So I like to rough it up. I put it in a container and I use painter's tape, blue tape, and I write with an indelible marker, lightly ground cane sugar and the date. For making aquafaba and for making other recipes, I want a very finely ground sugar, like castor sugar across the pond. Then I use my blender. I use my Vitamix. I have a dry bowl, but I've also done it in my regular bowl. So that's what you can use. Susie's helping for gluten-free and dairy-free desserts. Well, actually, everything I made today is gluten-free and dairy-free. Everything I make is dairy-free. Vegan is dairy-free. There is no dairy in a vegan dessert. Not all vegan desserts are gluten-free. Not all gluten-free desserts are vegan, but they can be. So what did I make today? I made beverages. There's no gluten in them at all. There's no gluten in the ganache. So it's really simple. Mary is beginning this course this month. Congratulations. I'm happy. I'll be happy to work with you. I'll be looking forward to that. You completed building a culinary kitchen on your property, a 2-year project. Wow, congratulations. And hopefully you'll open after COVID. Well, it is a perfect time for the course. I'm glad you're here. Tabitha says her sister wants to be a pastry chef. Is this the school she will need? Well, I really, truly believe that this is the most detailed vegan dessert course available anywhere. It took a very long time to develop. This was my dream course because I was teaching, for example, vegan baking boot camp a few times a year. Very few students could come in. I only did it 2 or 3 times, and I had 4.5 days. Here you get a real grounding in foundational technique so that you can go ahead and really do well. And what's really interesting about it to me is that we have absolute beginners, and they often do best work because they come in with a beginner's mind. I ask everyone to come in with a beginner's mind. And we also have professional pastry chefs and everyone in between. One of my most recent graduates is French Canadian. She has been a cake decorator for 10 years. She does beautiful pastry work. She decided it was time, at the urging of a friend actually that she's working with now, to learn vegan desserts. And she said she felt like she got a box of new crayons. She was so excited about it, and her work was fabulous. And the work from people who say, well, I never made anything, I don't know, have really done beautifully. So if your sister wants to talk to me about the course, have her write to me at fran@rouxbe.com. I'll be happy to talk to her. Catherine wants to know creative uses for agar. You've used it to set jellos. Well, So again, agar is actually, it's a sea vegetable, and it comes in 3 forms: flakes, powder, and a bar. You don't really see the bars very much any longer. The powder is not just finely ground up flakes. It's 3 to 5 times as strong. So you need to really learn how to do that. So of course you can make Jell-O. You can make Jell-O shots. You can do layered Jell-O desserts. You can make that lightly gelled soup. But agar is also, as I said earlier, something that will help. We need some structure that we're not going to get when we take out whipping cream, when we take out eggs, for example. And agar, and particularly in combination with a starch, will create a foundation. So I love agar. It's just something that I really like using very much. There's tons of things. Okay, Julie can't eat chocolate, but use carob in its place. Is there a technique to make carob hard like chocolate? That is really interesting, Julie. So right after I changed my diet and there were no vegan desserts, well, the vegan desserts that I found were gummy. Someone handed me a kind of a brown cake, and I tasted it and I didn't like it at all because it was carob, it wasn't chocolate. If it had been made well, it could have been delicious, but they're different. They're both brown. So I find that carob tastes best, the powder, when it's roasted lightly first, and it will clump up and then sift it. To make carob chocolate, you have to use 1-to-1 coconut oil. I have researched questions like this before, and you have to be okay with that. It's, if you're using 1/3 of a cup of carob powder, you're going to use 1/3 of a cup of coconut oil. And there's really no way to get around it. And you say so it won't melt as soon as it's taken out of the freezer. Well, that makes me think that you have been making it. Some homemade confections do melt. I want to let everyone know that a lot of there's a perception that carob is healthier than chocolate. Now, if you're allergic to chocolate, you can't eat chocolate. That's just the way that it is. So I understand that. But most of the carob confections that are in the marketplace use hydrogenated oils, or a lot of oils and a lot of added ingredients that I don't particularly find healthy. So you want to be careful about that. Evelina wants to know what's the allowable percentage of fat in a dessert so there's no fermentation during digestion. Fermentation during digestion generally comes from when you're digesting carbohydrates. So this is not something that I'm familiar with, but fermentation during digestion is actually, as far as I know, a good thing, not a bad thing. In terms of, I'm scrolling because I think I lost. Here we go. In terms of allowable percentage of fat, for me, it's the least amount of fat that I can use in a particular recipe and get the result that I want. For someone who is on a no-fat diet, it's finding a recipe that will work using no fat. Your second part of your question, can nuts be roasted? Yeah, nuts can be roasted, of course. I roast nuts. I think it brings up the flavor. If so, then don't these fats become carcinogenic? I think you're talking about acrylamide, this action that happens when any food, even toast, is exposed. When any food is exposed to high heat, there's an action, and then there's the acrylamide, and it's not healthful. But I roast my nuts low and slow. I think they taste better that way. Chocolate substitute, Barbara? No, I do not. I think, you can try some carob. but you're going to have to really change the recipe. Roast the carob first and grind it. Change up the amount of sweetener. You might not need as much. You probably need more fat because it's drier, in my opinion, just in my opinion. So if you can't have chocolate, then sometimes there really isn't a great substitute. Just don't use it. Laura, who is in the course, wants to use a delicious pastry cream for your agar cubes. This pastry cream is really delicious. In fact, I made some. I can pull it out of the freezer. If I omit the agar, she wants to know if she omits the agar and guar gum. So agar and guar gum is added to this cream and it comes to a boil actually in the Vitamix. And then this cream can become actually a tart filling that you can cut. Will the recipe be appropriately liquid consistency for blooming and cooking with agar? There's a lot of good information in Laura's question. So when you're cooking with agar, you have to allow it to bloom the same way that or swell, the same way that you bloom gelatin. You want to put it into some cool liquid first, cool room temperature liquid, and just let it dissolve. People used to say to me all the time, I just can't get an agar dessert right. There's always flakes or clumps. Well, you have to let it bloom. So, Laura, treat your pastry cream the way you would treat coconut milk. And I'm pretty sure that this is in the course. Take a little bit of water from the total measurement of your cream and bloom the agar on the water and then add the cream. But when you're cooking, know that, or you will definitely find out, that cashew creams really thicken when they cook. So I would make the pastry cream with more liquid than is in the recipe and do a test. Just do a test. Jenny wants to know if I have a recipe for a gluten-free and dairy-free bread that doesn't come out hard and dense. Bread is not really my thing, although recently I made a killer vegan challah, and it was so good. But no, I don't. Go to Julie Hasson, HASSEN.com, but just Google Julie Hasson. She is the gluten-free, dairy-free bread expert, and I am sure that you're going to get some really good information for her. Sarah wants to know the best vegan butter without all the additives. You know, look up Miyoko's, look up Earth Balance, look up Country Crock and online, and then you can read the ingredient list, because at this point they all have a number of different kinds. So I can't really off the top of my head say, well, this one, Miyoko's is the cleanest. I will say that. Oh, Patrick put up the link to Julie. Thank you, Patrick. Chastity has a problem getting vegan fluffy pancakes. We have delicious pancakes in Rouxbe, not in this course, but in Rouxbe, and there shouldn't be any problem getting fluffy vegan pancakes. If anybody has a favorite recipe that they want to share with Chastity, put it in this chat and we'll see if we can get it to her. But you know, I happen to like waffles, not pancakes, so I don't make pancakes very often. Miyoko Schinner of Miyoko's Creamery, of the butter that we're talking about, has a book called Homemade Vegan Pantry. And one of the recipes in that book is for making a vegan, everything is vegan, a vegan pancake mix. And the last time I was with my kids, I saw that they make a whole bunch of it up at one time and then just use it. And they got lots of fluffy pancakes. Robert says, always interested in healthy and unusual flavor blending. Always need help with plating. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Well, Robert, there's, you know, in terms of flavor blending, I mean, the sky's the limit. lately I have a thing for rosemary and thyme in my desserts. I just love it. So there's lots of things you can do. I like using turmeric, a little bit of turmeric with a date syrup, which is also called Ceylon. I like the way that goes. So the same thing that I did here, take one, make something. I don't want to say plain vanilla because I love vanilla. I just love vanilla, and it's so expensive now, but it just brightens all of our desserts. And then try using get some ideas for flavorings and see how it works in a little dish. I do that in little bitty bowls without pouring into one. In terms of plating, I will tell you my little secret is I'm not very good with plating myself, but I'm working on it. So, go and have a look. If you're in one of the Rouxbe courses, look at the other students' work. If you're not, Instagram, Pinterest is full of beautiful plating. For me, less is more. We've got someone here who's looking for healthy diabetic sweets. I've said this before, both my stepsons are type 1 diabetics, and over time they were told that using real sweeteners was definitely more healthful than using artificial sweeteners. I don't use any artificial sweeteners, so you'll have to see what you can do about that. Do I ever use cream of tartar to stabilize vegan meringue? Yes, pretty much every time. You need an acid to stabilize vegan meringue in the same way that you need an acid to stabilize egg white meringue. If you don't have cream of tartar, you can use some lemon juice or white vinegar, but I have cream of tartar. That's what I use. Oh, so Helene noticed that I mentioned a vegan pizel recipe on my Facebook page. It was actually made for me, but I know who has the recipe. And if you send an email to me, I'm pretty sure that it is shareable, and I'll be happy to share it with you or anybody who would like it. If you know what a pizel is, I don't have a pizel maker, but Andrea Corby-Fine, who is a wonderful friend and a graduate of Plant Pro, had she had a very special relationship with her grandma. Her grandmother died just last year. I think she was 99 or maybe 100 and was still living at home. And they used to love to cook together. So Andrea put on her grandma's apron. This was around Christmas time, and had grandma's pizel press. And she brought me so many. It was heaven. It was really heaven. I love the flavor. I love anise, and it was really great. So Katya is looking for mascarpone or cream. For a pie recipe that calls for mascarpone or cream cheese, can we use cashew-based substitute? Yeah, definitely. There's lots of ways to do mascarpone. Make a very heavy cashew cream. You're probably going to want to add some gums, guar, for example, maybe a little bit of agar. You want it to get thick and make sure it's flavored. I always add a little bit of lemon zest. The creme fraiche and vegan creme fraiche, I take, for the most part, cashew cream, this cashew cream recipe that's in the course, and it might be on my website too. I don't know. I see Kathy Gold is here. A friend and colleague owns a cooking school in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Came and did a tasting. We were, I think at the time, right, Kathy? I think at the time we were able to be together. But what I found was if I made a very thick cashew cream, added some lemon juice, and kept it on the counter, lightly covered for a day, and then I tasted it, and another day kind of ferments, and it made the most delicious, to me, creme fraiche. I really I really loved it. Okay. Yay. Celia said she used to make egg creams all the time at your grandpa's shop, Ray's candy store. Where was Ray's? I want to know. I'm going to make an egg cream right now. So the candy store that I went to was Uncle Milty's candy store. And there's a whole thing. There's a whole thing to making an egg cream. There never was an egg in egg cream. And there are people to this day who are fighting over the order of things. Like, does the milk go in first or does the chocolate? You bet. And by the way, I almost fell down at my local organic market. It's called Mom's Organic Market in Center City here. Fox's You Bet now has an organic Fox's You Bet, if you can believe this, such a thing. But they do. So I'm just going to take and I'm not so Uncle Milty would be very mad at me for making it sloppy like this. So I've got this. I'm going to use my oat milk. Now this particular Oatly in the white is a lower fat oat milk. The one in the blue is fattier, or if I wanted this to be richer, I would use maybe cashew cream. And now I don't have seltzer, but oh boy, this is gonna, don't even think about it. It's gonna be so good. So there you go. There's my egg cream, my eggless cream. And it's so good. And it tastes like dessert because it's chocolate syrup and it's milk. But when you think about it, there's no sugar in my ganache. It was a certain percentage of chocolate, a certain percentage of milk, any favorite milk except for rice milk. It's just doesn't have enough protein in it to work, in my opinion, and I don't like the taste of hemp milk in this. And some milk and some, let me just take a taste. Do you mind? I really never taste on camera, but I'm dying here. It's good. It's really good. So that was really fun. Shar said, Fox's You Bet. Well, yeah, but you know, Shar, come back. These beautiful earrings were a gift to me. Shar, who can do everything, made me earrings for a Christmas present. Ping. That's where I got my whole wheat pastry flour, Sunrise Mill. And there's the link. But I will tell you this. I'd like to know your experiences. I spoke with one of the owners because the first recipe that I used with this Sunrise Mill whole wheat pastry flour, I bought their rye flour, whole wheat pastry flour, whole wheat flour, maybe AP flour too. No, I think just whole wheat pastry flour, whole wheat flour, and rye. It's different. And the owner, Joan, said, well, it's like comparing apples and oranges because this is a heritage wheat. So it's a completely different thing. It weighed a little bit differently. They say on their website, people who have gluten problems can really digest this wheat. You know, I don't know. I don't have problems with wheat. But thank you for putting that up. And if anybody is looking for a place to get whole wheat pastry flour, you can try that. Is there a final transcript of all the Q&As that we can refer back to? Cynthia, if you mean in here, I don't actually know. Let's ask Patrick. So no, there is not. There is not. People who are in any of the Ruby courses can go and watch the video again. There's lots of times people miss the video if they have other things to do. I can really only take one more question here. If you have a burning, one or two, if you have a burning question, write to me at fran@rouxbe.com and I will be happy to answer your questions. Stormy says, many of the plant milks in the grocery store have oil in them. Well, they do. And they have other things in them too. So, you can read the container and look for the ones that are the cleanest. So this West soy milk is the only one I use. It's water organic soybeans. That's it. I don't use soy milk when I'm making desserts for lots of people because I don't use nut milk. Then either to take into consideration that there are many people who are soy avoiders. I'm not one of them. And who are nut allergic. So I go to oat milk. You can also so easily make your own nut and seed milk. So then you don't have to worry about any additives at all. Anu wants to know, is this part of the plant-based course? This is a standalone course. There's the plant-based professional course. That's a 6-month course. This is a 3-month strictly essential vegan desserts course. And Joanne wants to know, do I recommend storing rolled oats in the fridge or freezer? I go through my oats really quickly. So I have some out in my pantry and the rest in my fridge and freezer. I keep all my nuts and seeds and flakes in the refrigerator and freezer. The fats in nuts and seeds and and flakes, that's good fat, that's healthy fat, but it can go rancid, so you want to keep them cold. And Caroline wants to know if I've worked with cacao nibs. Well, yes, I have, and here are some. So, we go over how chocolate is made in this course. And this is ground up cocoa bean. If you take, I use this slightly bitter, does have some taste of chocolate, like not in your face chocolate. And for people who are allergic to nuts, I use cacao nibs in place of walnuts in recipes like that. And so that's it. Jane wants to know what's my favorite chocolate vegan recipe. I can't. I have 4 grandchildren. I don't have a favorite. No, I mean, it depends. I would say probably my chocolate cake to live for. It was my breakthrough cake. It's so versatile. I use it. I have, a standard. I like to make a tort. You can make a double layer cake. There's a gluten-free version. There's an oil-free version, but it just depends, lately for me. And I think it's the time. It seems to be warm chocolate pudding as my favorite chocolate dessert. Although I think right now it might be my egg cream and my hot cocoa. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I really enjoyed this time. I love the interaction. I hope that you got some of your questions answered. And that, again, you can always write to me at fran@rouxbe.com. And if you have any questions about the course or taking the course, you can ask me that as well. I hope I'll see you next month. I'm going to pick an interesting topic for next month. Thank you for spending this hour with me. And everybody, take care, be well, eat healthy, and save a little room for a small, healthful dessert.